Imagine a day when benevolence and brutal reality clash, when one courageous act of kindness sets off a chain reaction. Answer that transforms people's lives. Picture a dedicated doctor who risks all to find unexpected consequences from her own workplace after saving a stray puppy, and just when it seems like everything is. In just a few minutes, a miracle occurs and lost. Come along with us while we resolve this. A journey of emotions that will warm your heart and boost your soul. Riverdale Medical Center Dr. Rebecca Lawson was well known for her gentle demeanor and strong dedication to her patients as she hurried through the packed hospital corridors. A faint groan could be heard. A sound that was both frantic and gentle stopped her in her tracks. A rundown stray, concealed behind a series of emergency doors. The dog shivered in the cold, but Rebecca scooped up the TR without hesitation. The eyes of the laying animal express a blend of affection and determination in that she made a choice that would change the puppy's fate and result in things she would never have. Reports of the doctor's unexpected act of generosity swiftly spread throughout the medical staff. But not everyone shared Rebecca's compassionate perspective after holding the puppy in the sterile hallways. When she was summoned to her boss's office, she saw a shocking and agonizing incident when her boss forcefully informed her that she was being fired effective immediately because the hospital had suffered significant financial losses as a result of her inappropriate priorities. Rebecca was immediately taken aback by the word, which left her perplexed and fear that saving a defenseless life can lead to termination in a situation where every second. As the shock of the firing began to set in, the atmosphere in the hospital became tense with astonishment and whispers. Al felt that something unusual was taking place, a combination of patience and raw emotion. Unexpected loss and a ray of hope, followed by 30 minutes later as Rebecca was crying as she stood outside the hospital because there was a commotion and something incredible had happened. Following hearing, a number of well-known local donors and animal welfare activists assembled at the hospital's gate, accompanied her altruistic act with a pledge that would not only support her actions, but also transform the lives of other people in need, as well as the stray puppy. This is the story of a physician who courageously, kindness, the excruciating cost of acting morally, and the remarkable result that showed that compassion can. Dr. Rebecca Lawson has always enjoyed changing people's lives in the most surprising ways. Stress on putting her patients' needs first at Riverdale Medical Center, and sometimes even those who are less fortunate, where, in the break room, where the bustle of rushed activity was as constant as the morning coffee ritual, Rebecca's kindness persisted, was familiar to her coworkers and patients that crisp autumn morning, but she would undoubtedly be tested in ways that, earlier in the day, as she navigated the packed corridors between consultations and emergency rooms, she never would have. Rebecca heard a faint, desperate moan coming from a dark corner. There was little time for doubt, so she trusted her gut and located a little spot near the hospital's emergency exit. The dirty stray puppy's quivering body in the cold and its large, soulful eyes. Unthinkingly, matted fur portrayed a scene of abuse and desertion. Rebecca made the decision to save this creature and embraced it in that quiet, life-affirming moment. Blameless life, despite the risks of deviating from a rigorous schedule. In a small on-call room, Rebecca wrapped the puppy in an extra blanket from her bag and patted it dry. The silent pleas of individuals in need were mirrored in different ways by the soft whimpers of the animals, which were full of both hope and sorrow, that the hospital's sterile corridors often failed to express in her mind. Each and every preserved life, whether it be animal or human, shown that compassion went beyond the bounds of the law, but fate had other plans. Like wildfire, word of her act of kindness swiftly spread throughout Riverdale Medical Center, as many of Rebecca's superior physician received supportive whispers and a supportive smile from her colleagues. Martin Coldwell saw the matter entirely differently. He thought that strict protocol and the efficient resource utilization peaked around 10:15 a.m., only half an hour following Rebecca's. She was summoned to the Oster office of Dr. Caldwell for rescue. The room was cold and sterile, a far cry from the warmth that had briefly enveloped her in the waiting room. Dr. Caldwell's tone was stern and angry when he broke the news. Lawson, even if you mean well, what you did today has disrupted our operations. Our responsibilities to our patients cannot be compromised by our own interests. We regret to inform you that, as of right now, you will no longer be able to access your post. His words were as sharp as a gavel in a courtroom that was deserted, leaving Rebecca stunned and heartbroken by what she believed best demonstrated her commitment to healing was now being used against her. Word of her dismissal spread. Some coworkers gripped and shook their heads, while others mumbled condolences in the hospital corridors. To the notion that laws ought to be followed, no matter how harsh the consequences, Rebecca with the stray, with the puppy in her arms, she bravely walked out of the building. As tears clouded her vision, the puppy sensed her anguish and nuzzled closer to its little body, intensifying the harshness of the fall air. Offering silent comfort as she stood there feeling duped and abandoned by a firm she had spent years of her life with. In less than 30 minutes, a remarkable transformation began to occur. Following her departure, a few residents got out of a stylish black vehicle that pulled up to the hospital's gate. When well-known philanthropists and animal welfare activists heard about her selfless deed, their eyes gleamed with. The group's respected leader, Ms. Charlotte Green, led them with determination and respect as they made their way to Rebecca. As we have heard, Lawson, a community leader known for her unwavering commitment to social issues, began with a smile. About your actions today, and we believe that your generosity, along with her many other attributes, is just what our town needs. Others, each demonstrating their support with pledges and contributions. When ideas for a new community effort surfaced, they suggested working together to create a designated fund, supporting neighborhood groups that help rehabilitate and find homes for these at-risk animals, as well as those that take care of stray animals. Creatures, their earnest and impassioned remarks transformed as they recounted a vision that turned the acrid taste of rejection into a spark of potential. Rebecca listened incredulously, not only supported her actions, but also promised to make them more frequent. Your dedication. After saving a life today, we want to make sure that no stray animal is overlooked. Mrs. We are prepared to finance a new initiative called Lawson Animal Care, Green said. The project is in your name if you are willing to take the lead. The offer was unexpected and just when the coolness of the autumn wind mixed with the warmth of human companionship, Rebecca began to feel hopeful. The hospital that had earlier reprimanded her for demonstrating compassion was now inadvertently once a cause of hopelessness. Her departure has now served as the impetus for something much more significant. Compassion was the focus of the community initiative as the team discussed the feasibility of implementing the new. The stray puppy gave Rebecca a new sense of direction in life. It lay by her side, a reminder of the life she had saved, the seeds of a spectacular transformation being sown. Despite the day's depressing and unexpected turn, it was now clear that sometimes the most amazing. Dr. Rebecca Lawson says that having the courage to follow one's passion with a new sense of purpose leads to results. Prepare to face a future in which her compassion would not only be recognized, but also lead to meaningful change in her neighborhood. After the impromptu encounter with the philanthropists outside the doctor's office at Riverdale Medical Center, it was a pivotal moment in Rebecca Lawson's life. Being fired still hurt like hell, but the deluge of, with the backing of the community, she became passionately determined, and the stray puppy became a living embodiment of herself. Rebecca decided to take a chance while holding compassion firmly in her arms. In the days that follow, they decide to lead the new initiative that Charlotte Green and her team have proposed into Rebecca's world, which was a far cry from the pristine corridors. Even while her prior employment had strict rules, she now had to cope with a flurry of meetings, planning sessions, and intense conversations with local animal welfare activists, community leaders, and even former co-workers who had come. Even while her actions were admirable, this new course did not excite everyone in the community. Some skeptics argued that it was dangerous to turn a private gesture of charity into a public undertaking. Compassion. A few local business owners were worried that the recently established Lawson Animal Care project might deplete funds from when other critical community services were being tested in public venues. These disagreements often broke out into heated debates. Rebecca's perseverance and ability to reconcile divergent viewpoints during one. At a town hall gathering held in a little community center, Rebecca spoke to a diverse group of supporters, and the environment was tense as the naysayers questioned her about how she would ensure the success of this endeavor. Suitably, and in accordance with the hospital's regulations, was your dismissal just a justification to conceal a more important problem? Rebecca listened intently, her eyes showing compassion and resolve. I understand your concerns, she answered calmly, but the most crucial thing is that we work together to build a system that supports those without and recognize the value of empathy. Ms. Charlotte Green and her team worked in the interim. They worked diligently behind the scenes, reaching out to local businesses to secure funding and resources for the project, arranged fundraising activities, and even managed to get the help of prominent media personalities. Began to bear fruit as more community members gave of their time and donations steadily rose. But as the initiative gained momentum, unanticipated challenges emerged, and a robust local. The initiative was openly condemned by a council member who is known for his strong support of traditional techniques, saying it would lead to subpar management and drain money from reputable nonprofits. Local news outlets took notice of public denunciations, which also generated a lot of conversation on social media. Rebecca struck a balance by making the Loss in Animal Care project the focal point of these events. She continued to struggle with the loss of her job while working late into the evenings on the project's organizing tasks. Working with animal shelters and negotiating bids, she took care of the little stray who had become her. On one poignant occasion, she was a silent inspiration as she walked past a local shelter. Rebecca, along with a team of dedicated volunteers and Miss Green, took a time to. She spoke in a tremulous voice, appreciating a line of recently rescued puppies, each of whose lives are significant. Emotion. I wish to ensure that all lost souls have the chance to find love and a home. Yet, not every interaction during a project planning session was favorable. How could you risk everything for a stray puppy? A co-worker at Riverdale Medical Center asked Rebecca. His eyes briefly flared with disapproval as the remark hit a deep chord. You lose your career as a result of your activities. I did what I believed, Rebecca said, taking a deep breath, despite the momentary doubt that weakened her resolve. It was right when she said that following your heart can often mean being by oneself, but it can also be joyful. The way that many of the people in the room were moved by her direct comments. Speaking in private about unresolved issues while gradually turning skeptics into cautious supporters. When her past began to surface, Rebecca received an anonymous letter stating that her act of kindness was not the letter was the first time she had spoken up for the voiceless and highlighted examples from her early days as a resident. Stories of little miracles, even when the letter may have been sent to someone else. Because of her unwavering compassion, Rebecca chose to utilize it as a reminder of her true purpose rather than allowing it to degrade or disgrace her. She embraced these recollections and used them to bolster her determination to implement sustainable change as the Loss in Animal Care. As the project developed, partnerships were formed with local community organizations, veterinary clinics, and even schools, instilling in children a sense of empathy and responsibility for all living things was the aim of educational programs. Every interaction and every victory confirmed the idea that sometimes a small deed of compassion can impacts that alter a community's entire course, not just the life of a single individual, but in the middle of. Rebecca would sometimes sit alone in the evenings, and even as her success grew, the pain of her exile remained. She would wonder if she had made the right choice as a stray dog curled up beside her, but she would also recall the help of Ms. Green, the heartfelt appreciation of animal shelters, and the grin of all hesitancy will soon vanish when a child learns to care for another living being, and the arguments, and, instead of being obstacles, the interactions that marked these tumultuous weeks served as stepping stones that helped Rebecca face her shortcomings, test her convictions, and emerge stronger and more resolved than before too. The Loss in Animal Care endeavor grew beyond its beginnings as a community endeavor with each challenge. but as a symbol of optimism and proof that good deeds always pave the way, even if they are occasionally costly. Because just as the first shock of her departure was wearing off, something truly astonishing emerged. That would go against both Rebecca's prior beliefs and her current views regarding Riverdale Medical Center. She was arranging her personal belongings in a small, quiet section of the hospital parking garage on a rainy afternoon. Rebecca noticed an envelope between a pallet of medical equipment and her locker. The envelope has a brand attached to it. She knew from her early hospital days that a single handwritten note with an official stamp was for the one whose heart sees clearly even while the world is blind, and who is captivated by her. With her emotions still raw, Rebecca carefully opened the envelope and saw a faded photo of herself as a child, standing confidently alongside several documents and a stray dog. The puppy she had saved that day looked remarkably similar to one in a hidden file in the documents. For years, the hospital had kept Rebecca's involvement in a secret pilot study during her time as a resident secret program that placed a high priority on community involvement and compassionate treatment, designed to include unconventional methods within the hospital's stringent protocols specifically to save, exists both inside and outside the organization's borders. The file with the name Project Compassion detailed several instances in which young doctors, Rebecca in particular, had demonstrated extraordinary empathy that defied expectations in one. Lawson, a young doctor, was commended for helping out in an emergency involving a stray cat at a local shelter, the event that sparked her advocacy career, but the document also revealed that the hospital had abruptly terminated the trial study, which added to its dismal tone. Strong board members put pressure on the administration, favoring a strict, data-driven approach over humanistic values. As Rebecca read the documents, her mind was racing with the revelation, which served as both a charge and a defense, demonstrated that her instinct to help the stray puppy was consistent with the compassionate care philosophy she had previously advocated, but it also brought her former employer, Dr. Martin, into disrepute. Coldwell's deliberate efforts to suppress innovative, caring approaches. According to the evidence, Caldwell had a major influence on the decision to shut down Project Compassion, which was made on. The paper was defended as an effort to save costs and simplify processes in truth, but it appeared that he acted in order to maintain the status quo, which valued efficiency over the chaotic, erratic character of human compassion. Rebecca's palms trembled as she read years before she was fired, a particularly damning memo was produced that said, orders from superiors to cease extraneous humanitarian endeavors that detract from departmental performance metrics. The notice went on to warn that any deviation from strict protocol would lead to disciplinary actions, including termination, in stark contrast to the considerate and caring care that has always defined the hospital's informal motto. The twist was like a tsunami to Rebecca, which is why the accusation that she had been fired that morning for having unbalanced priorities suddenly seemed to be part of a much larger conspiracy. There was no trace of bureaucratic cruelty in her dismissal. Rather, it was a deliberate move to quiet those involved. The documents showed that several other good doctors who had dared to question a rigid institution had faced similar, in an attempt to look more efficient at all costs. Their careers were ruined in the midst of more than this. Mental conflict seemed to be symbolized by the stray puppy Rebecca had been lovingly and frantically caring for. Once merely a rescued animal, the little creature now took on a new significance as a living reminder of a legacy that had been deliberately suppressed. As Rebecca cradled the dog, understanding that her actions today were more than in addition to carrying out her life's work, she was defying a system that had long ignored empathy. To seek justice and reclaim the lost legacy of Project Compassion, Rebecca decided to take the documents to court. Miss Charlotte Green, the community leader who had earlier given her unwavering support during their appointment in a quiet cafe, Rebecca explained every detail, note, and letter. As each piece of evidence revealed the true reason for her termination, Mrs. Green's eyes widened with a mix-up. Her voice was steely, yet she said, shock and resolve, "This isn't just about you, Rebecca. We must expose this injustice and ensure that the foundation of our community's healthcare system is restored, as they had intended. Since kindness isn't punished, the conversation turned to the broader implications of the public revelation of the methodical suppression of innovative D at Riverdale Medical Center. Life-saving techniques in favor of money and bureaucratic procedures. It might lead to a dramatic shift in the way that healthcare was controlled in the region. Rebecca's termination, once a personal tragedy, was now taking shape, became a beacon of hope and a call to action for everyone who believed that kindness was the foundation of sincere recovery. During one pivotal moment, when raindrops softly struck the cafe, Rebecca made the decision to cease letting the stray puppy sleep in her lap while she was contentedly dozing off. Utilized against her were those who formerly held similar opinions, but instead she chose to spearhead a campaign to reinterpret what it meant to be concerned and recover the suppressed legacy of compassion and transform not just her life, but also the lives of countless others who came after her. Following Rebecca's shocking revelation regarding Project Compassion, things began to shift in her immediate surroundings. Startling discovery that her deeds of compassion were a part of a suppressed behavior rather than separate mistakes. Legacy stirred deep emotions in Rebecca and those she was surrounded by. The hidden file with its heartfelt testimonies and cold messages caused many to rethink the leadership story of Riverdale Medical Center and re-examine their personal values there. Rumors about the controversy had already begun to circulate among certain staff members who were acquainted with the hospital's stringent regulations. The leadership expressed a cautious curiosity in finding out the truth behind Rebecca's termination in the break room. Maria, an experienced nurse, confided in a few of her colleagues, and the conversations became conspiratorial. "I've always believed that our hospital prioritized data over people. Maybe Rebecca's termination wasn't only the intention with regard to one stray puppy was to quiet anyone who dared to go above and beyond the call of duty in showing concern for others. But the news caused a painful mixture of humiliation and vindication," according to Dr. Alan Pierce. Rebecca's old mentor and close friend was obviously upset when he learned about the withheld documents. He had always valued Rebecca's kindness, but he had also assisted in upholding the hospital's strict. He admitted in a devastating private conversation, "I've seen so many excellent doctors put aside for doing." Yes, exactly. I never imagined that such a harsh consequence would follow such a genuine act of kindness. Meanwhile, Ms. Charlotte Green, a compassionate care advocate and community leader, recognized the broader implications of Rebecca's discovery meeting with her coworkers in her compact, yet active workplace. She declared, "This file is a bombshell," and ordered an urgent strategy meeting. Copies of the documents are placed on the table to show that the system is not only broken, but also actively stifling empathy. We must use this evidence to rally support for change. Group composed of local activists, animal welfare campaigners, and concerned citizens listened intently as she outlined a plan to expose the hospital's secret activities. Their objective was clear too: ensure that the general public would learn the truth and demand reform. In a startling development, the hospitals, the patients and their relatives were equally moved during a modest community event. Rumors about the controversy sparked an impromptu gathering in the hospital foyer where patients revealed private information. Reports about the negligence and disinterest of one elderly patient, M. Thompson, described with trembling fingertips how I used to feel invisible here, as though my pain didn't exist, but after learning that, I feel valued and seen because of the medical professionals like Rebecca who have fought for the lives of everyone, including stray animals. Many people in attendance were moved by her poignant statement, which strengthened the resolve of those who believe that compassion should be at the heart of healthcare. And when word began to spread about the contents of the files outside as a result, the media reported the news with a mix of enthusiasm and doubt. Several interviews were arranged by the tenacious reporter Olivia Reed, who had previously supported Rebecca. One employee who was keen to speak up during one of these interviews was a nurse. Vividly explained how I've witnessed colleagues suppress their empathy for years out of fear of. Since Rebecca's courage has been made public, I think we have a chance to. Regaining our humanity sparked a quick and split public reaction. with some local. As business owners and board members defended the hospital's strict standards, more and more voices demanded. During this time, Rebecca herself was experiencing a substantial shift. Following the heartbreak of betrayal and the agony of losing her profession, she now sought solace in the unexpected support from former colleagues and neighbors. Each word of encouragement and empathetic comment from the wounds from her dismissal were lessened in quiet moments by others who backed her mission. Rebecca would ruminate about the papers late at night while she held the stray puppy, whom she now affectionately called Hope. After revelations, they can decide to stay firm and try to eliminate sympathy. Whisper to Hope, but the truth will soon be revealed, even within the hospital's leadership. As authorities' once impenetrable facade began to crumble, some mid-level managers who had previously been reluctant to speak out started contesting the rationale behind the harsh disciplinary measures they implemented, and they held separate meetings in staff lounges discussing the possibility of reviewing hospital regulations and even quietly pushing for internal reforms. But for the time being, the highest echelons of government remained firm. The initial shock of Rebecca's termination and the subsequent disclosure of Project Compassion was replaced by a more deliberate collective response. The hospital, which had previously been a stronghold of rigid orthodoxy, was beginning to shift as staff and patients battled the repercussions of suppressed empathy and the community's demand for accountability. Lead by Olivia Reed's coverage of M. Green, for example, was constantly growing. Louder at this turbulent period of change, each individual's reactions, whether they are fierce or mute resignation, each person's anger or hopeful resolve woven together, formed a tapestry of human experience. Every small act of defiance against the established system and every conversation contributed to the slow transformation of suppressed legacy of compassion was not a dark secret hidden in dusty archives, but a living, breathing movement. Rebecca's painful but determined craving for attention caused the folks around her to begin altering their lives. Enthusiasm for the next phase of this unfolding tale, which was meant to disclose the truth and establish a new path for the future where compassion serves as the foundation for healing rather than as a drawback. Regarding Rebecca's shocking revelation, a mix of cautious optimism and simmering discontent began to settle in. Challenges and covert subplots began to emerge, adding more levels of complexity to an already turbulent events in the days after the release of Project Compassion's long-suppressed file. Rumors concerning a previous patient, Dr. Samuel, spread outside the walls of Riverdale Medical Center. Ortiz, who had previously supported the innovative pilot program in silence, got in touch with Rebecca and A. He called Rebecca late at night and confided in her in a private conversation. I've been keeping an eye on this from a distance, and you should know that there were other exceptional physicians, in their own manner, who were quietly disregarded for similar acts of generosity, and I believe your story is only one part of a far longer tale. Dr. Ortiz's disclosure implied a secret network of caregivers whose careers were wrecked for daring to question the cal deficiency in the system. This subplot created a new challenge by exposing the full extent of the systemic unfairness that had forced good-hearted people to choose between devotion to. Meanwhile, the humanitarian sensibilities and manners that formerly defined their vocation. The simmering hostility that grew between the ranks in the hospital hallways gave younger nurses more confidence. As the public support for Rebecca's actions increased, they began setting up informal gatherings to discuss how they may gradually progress internal reforms in these secret meetings without jeopardizing patient care. In the quiet sections of the break room, or even in the poorly lit hospital corridors, they talked about whether the current. We have seen what occurs when a system that penalizes behavior is replaced with one that rewards empathy equally to efficiency. Happens when compassion is controlled, a nurse stated, her voice trembling with determination and terror. But maybe if we work together, we can turn it around and enhance the communities. In reaction to the scandal, a new plotline was created, and Olivia Reed, the persistent journalist whose work had come to represent the truth for many, began receiving anonymous tips that indicated, according to one informant, funds meant for the administration's financial issues at Riverdale Medical Center. Helping a government that suppressed creativity was necessary because patient care was being moved into clandestine accounts. Project Compassion and similar initiatives, which if true, could not only harm the hospital's reputation, but may also lead to legal issues that could shake the healthcare sector as a whole. Network in the region, the mounting pressure from the media, and the growing network of dissenting voices within the. In a closed meeting, the hospital board made a critical decision after considering the facilities, whether to begin an internal audit or engage outside consultants to investigate the financial discrepancies. Many found it disconcerting that further scandal would be revealed, yet others found it was the only path to true accountability, and the board's internal strife added still another degree of difficulty when organizations formed that were more concerned with upholding the hospital's reputation than carrying out an exhaustive examination of its as Rebecca's individual quest for justice became more closely linked to broader institutional change inside this. As things changed, Mrs. Charlotte Green felt increasingly burdened by the responsibility of managing both the Loss and Animal Care Project and a developing community movement. Calling for healthcare reform at one of her strategy meetings, which took place in a little. Former hospital employees, community center advocates, and even some. Our mission has expanded beyond saving stray lives, and anxious patients gathered to discuss their next course of action. The goal now is to restore dignity to healthcare, M. Green said passionately. In order to guarantee that acts of kindness are respected rather than punished, the gathering underlined the interconnectedness throughout the world. Rebecca's personal battle was now a microcosm of a larger battle against a organization that had long placed a higher priority on impersonal processes than on the human soul. As these subplots converged, Rebecca had to cope with the emotional turmoil of her own rejection, but also the intricate web of problems that can overshadow the hospital's history. An anonymous email was sent to her. Email asking her to meet at a location and signed, just with the initials O, in a secret spot adjacent to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The email hinted at even more widespread malfeasance. Secret ledger that could reveal the full extent of financial wrongdoing linked to the suppression of compassionate care. Rebecca battled the conflict between her need for explanation and her fear of further disturbance. The stray puppy, whose we now affectionately call Hope, curled up. The unseen network appears beside her, as if offering silent support throughout her anxious moment with each of these new issues. Of sideline doctors, internal conflicts among nurses, muttered allegations of financial misconduct, and when Rebecca received an anonymous tip that encouraged her to carry out a more comprehensive investigation, her task became more urgent and risky. We're growing, and every move she made may result in further loss, both personally and professionally. Capacity to transform the way healthcare is provided in her community at this period of elevated tension. When multiple plot lines began to align, Rebecca realized that her struggle was no longer about helping a single stray animal, but doing one act of compassion. It was about reviving a tradition of compassion that had been deliberately suppressed for too long, and about ensuring that each and every act of kindness, no matter how small, was recognized as the cornerstone of healing throughout the weeks. Following the sad events at Riverdale Medical Center, Rebecca's journey began to have emotional undertones, to emerge in unexpected and uncensored ways at every quiet moment and discussion. Every passionate discussion revealed people's strong, often conflicting emotions. Caught in the tornado of change late one rainy evening, shortly after Rebecca had presented Miss Charlotte Green with the startling information about Project Compassion, she found herself in a rather dimly at a cafe gathering with several amiable employees and former colleagues. There was a lot of unstated pain and hope. Dr. Alan Pierce continues to battle his previous guilt. I've seen so many of us, he added quietly, shattering the silence with Rebecca's acquiescence. Your story brings to mind the days when we had to repress intelligent, caring physicians. His voice wavered between regret and gratitude, revealing his genuine faith in healing beyond the bounds of convention. A young man across the table shared the internal conflict that had been bothering him for years. Nurse Jenna hesitated before continuing, her eyes filled with determination and uncertainty. I've always wondered if the stringent rules we follow actually rob us of our. I pondered everything after witnessing humanity risk everything for that stray puppy. Yet now that the disclosures from Project Compassion have left me torn. I want to push for reform, but her brief but poignant admission was that she was afraid about the consequences for the patients who depend on us to keep the peace. Resonated with a large number of people in the room, generating a wave of silent nods and looks in a unique but comparable, heated conversation. Mrs. Charlotte Green had a private meeting with Olivia Reed to discuss the delicate balance that needs to be struck between bringing systemic misconduct to light and preserving the dignity of the caregivers. In the little back room of a community center, Charlotte's voice was forceful but gentle, and Olivia absorbed every bit of. Not only does the material we find hurt the hospital's administration, but it also breaks the hearts of those who have suffering in silence. Therefore, we must exercise caution to ensure that our pursuit of the truth doesn't become a weapon that destroys the very. Olivia's eyes demonstrated a tremendous dedication. Thus, we wish to compassionately bring her back to life. I understand the risk, Justice remarked with a cautious nod, but sometimes we owe it to these caregivers and their patients to show that healing requires exposing the most profound wounds. That in the midst of hospital stress, empathy is a strength rather than a weakness. Mid-level managers were congregating in the quiet inner hallway close to the nursing station. Supervisors gathered for an impromptu discussion, and one supervisor, Mr. Richardson, pinching his forehead, he conveyed his concern. We've always prided ourselves on maintaining order, but nowadays the whole idea of empathy is under investigation. If we allow these deeds of kindness to be openly recognized, we're due. I'm worried about how it will impact his colleagues' operational efficacy in patient care when we draw the line. Debated awkwardly, split between following institutional guidelines and the Rebecca herself exemplifies the undeniable human need for kindness in spite of these internal conflicts. One quiet evening after a long day, I became enmeshed in a vortex of self-reflection and resolve. Of parties and community events, she sat alone with a stray puppy, now affectionately known as Hope, on a park bench. The chilly fall wind at her feet carried the distant sounds of distant voices as she gazed. As she gazed into Hope's trustworthy eyes, she found herself grappling with a dilemma that had been bothering her since that awful day. Is my constant compassion a burden or a gift? Am I overly optimistic in the morning? Recalling the harsh comments made by Dr. She was able to confront her anxieties in the quiet alone of the park. Caldwell and the devastating shock of her dismissal, but also the tremendous support from the community and the sincere acknowledgments from people who believe that change was possible require me to believe that doing the right thing, even if it causes pain, will. Finally, as she stroked Hope's smooth fur, she said to herself that she would light the way for others. Last week, during a heated town hall meeting that Ms. Green sponsored, sentiments reached. There was a furious dispute between some traditionalists who insisted that strict, the only method to ensure consistent patient care, and an enthusiastic Vos Rose, a member of a group of younger workers who advocate for structural change, is caught between anger and despair. Rebecca stood up in spite of the commotion and spoke calmly yet firmly, advocating their vision for healthcare's future, stated that compassion is a weakness and that empathy disrupts the order. But whenever I gaze into Hope's eyes, I remember that healing is about human connection, not efficiency, and that it shouldn't be punished by our rules. She told many personal stories in her remarks, and this should be a tribute to our empathy. The atmosphere was markedly altered, momentarily dampened by grief and unwavering resolve. Social atmosphere and the private conversations that followed the gathering, which continued to reveal the strong emotional issues that each individual faced. Dr. Pai, who has previously identified empathy as a possible barrier to clinical detachment, began to question his own beliefs. Perhaps you need to reconsider what it means to truly care, he said in a whisper to a close colleague. For many nurses, the problem was very professional and personal, and each new act of kindness now carried the weight of possible revenge, but also the belief that their genuine concern could result in reform as these complex relationships repercussions grew. It became clear that the way to A. There were many tough choices and concessions in a more compassionate system. Yet in the intricate link, various emotions, there's also a growing feeling of unity and the belief that they might open the door for empathy and excellence to coexist. So, in the midst of due to their individual and group hardships, the protagonists proceeded cautiously, each inspired by the belief that as time passed, the greatest wounds might eventually be healed by the strength of compassion and truth. Dramatic revelations, fierce disputes, and a sense of imminent progress was made at Riverdale Medical Center and in the community, yet behind the hopeful surface, unsettling fresh hints of deeper mystery suddenly began to emerge, heightening Rebecca's tension even further. In the quiet of a cloudy morning, Rebecca received an anonymous call that marked the start of the journey. Hours before daybreak, the caller's voice was jumbled, but the message was clear. It seems that some people at Riverdale will stop at nothing to hide the mysterious truth. She shuddered because it was the first indication that powerful forces, perhaps much more entrenched than the individuals who had dismissed her, were employed for a business dedicated to stifling any challenge to the status quo. Yet at the same time, there were tales among hospital staff of mysterious people they saw close by. After hours, surveillance footage is seen in designated locations of the building. Hush groups saw a dark person deliberately approaching the archives in the dim light of the break room. In storage areas where the suppressed files of Project Compassion were kept, others speculated that some were worried that the invader might be connected to the money issues mentioned in anonymous conversations, that the person was there to retrieve or maybe destroy evidence that could expose additional misconduct in the meantime. In a surprising development that deepened the mystery, Olivia Reed received a tip from someone claiming to be an insider in the hospital administration, sent her a scanned paper with the header "Confidential" on it. Only investigative journalists saw the paper, which detailed several enigmatic transactions and dubious. Additionally, the tip revealed figures that showed funds meant for patient treatment had been moved into secret accounts, that there may be a secret network behind these anomalies that will stop at nothing to maintain the current quo. When Olivia realized that the corruption was much more widespread than anyone had previously believed, her heart raced. The suggestion was intended to protect a sophisticated financial system, not just to stifle goodwill. Built on simultaneous concealment and exploitation, a slight but discernible shift occurred within the hospital's middle management. A few brave managers who had been quiet and complicit before began to talk in whispers and quietly in the hallways. One of these managers, Mr. Horowitz, was seen leaving an envelope beside the nurse's station in a private Dropbox account that is only accessible by a select few trustworthy individuals. But there were rumors that it included damaging information linking some high-ranking. When officials repressed Project Compassion, staff tensions rose, and some began to wonder if a full-scale internal disclosure could result from this internal decrease, because the new features sparked an intense reaction from the community and neighboring cafe where activists and many people gathered to discuss the controversy, and many of them got into furious disputes. One activist, Maria, sadly, the corruption that has been suffocating our healthcare system will continue if we let these secrets to go undiscovered. Even if it makes us uncomfortable, we must demand answers because the system will not stop. A group of young volunteers who had previously helped at the very foundation of Riverdale Medical Center found resonance in her words, began organizing a campaign on social media to reveal the truth using hashtags. Locally, Truth for Compassion and Expose the Silence started to gather traction, putting more strain on the hospital's management and drawing local news outlets' attention. On the one hand, Rebecca struggled as this gathering storm pulled her in multiple directions, with the psychological and professional repercussions of her termination, while on the other side, she was being pressured by the unnamed notifications and fresh data to begin a more comprehensive investigation of the hospital's clandestine activities late one. She was walking home at night with hope in her arm when she spotted a mysterious figure standing under a The person with the cloak over their face gave her a look when the street light flashed. In a whisper, the man said, "This is for you, small, unmarked flash drive. It includes information that could change everything. But tread cautiously, since once the truth is out, there's no turning back." Rebecca could ask about anything. The ghost disappeared into the darkness, leaving her both thrilled and terrified at the repercussions of this new lead. As accusations of corruption and collaboration grew and overall tension rose, once merely resonating with the sounds of routine medical care, the hospital's corridors suddenly seemed to vibrate with a fever pitch. Hidden details and suspicious appearances, the possibility that someone was purposefully attempting to suppress even more. Because of the incriminating material, there was a feeling of expectancy and terror in every conversation. A recurrent query surfaced with every shadow captured on security footage and anonymous letters. How far those in positions of authority would go to protect their interests, and more importantly, was Rebecca willing to? Rebecca's stakes were higher than ever as she faced a system that was prepared to stifle empathy at any cost. While a constant reminder of a life she had saved, hope nestled by her side while resolve hardened it. The lives that remained to be spared seemed to look up at her with silent determination more than ever. Realized that uncovering the full extent of this conspiracy was more than just a personal cause. It was a struggle for the soul. Her neighborhood, as the investigation developed, and the enigmatic flash drive drove Rebecca's quest for the truth. Relationships between characters and various subplots began to surprisingly come together within the heated. New relationships were formed, and existing ones were renewed in the corridors of Riverdale Medical Center and the broader community, re-examined in view of a dispute that could change the concept of compassionate care. And the tenacious reporter Olivia Reed developed in the days following the anonymous tip. She began to uncover financial irregularities at the hospital that extended beyond its financial emphasis through a series of private discussions. Additional medical experts' testimonies of suffering under the hospital's stringent, profit-driven policy, based on an interview with Dr. Samuel Ortiz, with a former resident, that some talented physicians have been covertly dismissed for similar acts of kindness. Ortiz remarked with a mix of regret and tenacity, "I wasn't the only one who suffered as a result of my overzealous concern. There's a huge network of." His words resonated deeply with good-hearted people who the system has silenced. She was inspired by Olivia to launch a special series on the Lost Healers project that would further emphasize the costs associated with suppressing compassion for those in Riverdale. The consequences of the controversy had a personal impact on hospital cafeteria staff as well. Rumors circulated. In the midst of speculation around the mysterious flash drive and the hooded delivery guy, Rebecca, a mid-level manager, was in private conversation with Mr. Harov, with a young nurse named Jenna. "I've seen things here that I never would have thought possible," muttered. "The clean exterior that this hospital puts on for the public isn't all there is to it. We must get in touch, find out who has been controlling Jenna, whose love for Rebecca has only become more intense over time." Excitedly agreed. "Maybe if we get together, we can push for reform from the," she whispered to herself, suggesting that a covert coalition was forming among those who believed empathy wasn't a. Miss Charlotte Green was diligently working on her in the interim, organizing several events with neighborhood activists, retired medical personnel, and even some. One of these occasions featured a gracious board member, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly patient who had long felt. She shared her personal story of being neglected by the system, stating, "I've been treated like just another number." Eye-watering, but after hearing about the courage of Dr. Lawson and given the possibility that the hospital is hiding these facts, I'm hoping that our opinions will finally be heard. Moving testimonies served as an inspiration for the group and helped to close the gap between the internal tensions of the hospital and the issues facing the community. In another development, the growing need for accountability prompted Dr. Allen and Rebecca to arrange a private meeting. Pierce, the mentor, had previously apologized sincerely for his role in maintaining the stringent hospital regulations over coffee at a quiet section of a local eatery, and Dr. Pierce said that I wanted to be of assistance, but I didn't trust the system until I saw what had happened to you, which forced me to examine my own shortcomings. Rebecca is not only a former colleague, but she has also learned that kindness cannot be measured. Their conversation, which was replete with remorse and a shared will to be saved, served as the foundation for Dr. Pierce to subtly encourage his classmates to undergo personal change, and his support became an essential link between the old guard with a new wave of compassionate reformers when the various hospital groups began to small-scale network connections that provided a more unified front against the firmly embedded bureaucracy was being subtly challenged by mid-level managers who had long felt bound by the top-down approach. Sharing information from internal Dropbox that links financial irregularities to decisions that had negatively impacted patient care. These revelations not only brought attention to the widespread misconduct at the institution, but also increased the legitimacy of Olivia Reed's upcoming expose, which was, they are prepared to spread a wider net throughout the region's whole healthcare system amidst this flurry of activity. Rebecca became aware that she was drawn to these networks more and more, where Anonymous offered her words of encouragement. Emails from references that offer proof and guarantees of more data that could lessen the barriers to. One such message, signed simply OOO, reiterated the need of providing empathetic care, of coming clean, and made reference to a confidential ledger that documented illicit financial transactions. But the message left her with more queries than answers. But it also made her more determined to pursue each lead because she was aware that she became closer to a broader revolution as a result of these interactions, which helped her to blur the lines between her personal and political lives. The different viewpoints began to become confused by vendettas and a call for structural change. An apologetic mentor, a determined journalist, fervent campaigners, and courageous frontline employees started to build a sophisticated network of resistance against a system that had long prioritized efficiency over empathy, and the stray puppy, who had inadvertently come to symbolize this entire campaign, nevertheless served as a living reminder that even the smallest act of kindness may have a profound impact on people's lives by causing a chain reaction. As these subplots came together, the potential for a unified movement for compassionate reform began to take shape that sought to restore a healthcare system where all human life or health was protected. In addition to exposing corruption, Animal was revered, and the bonds formed during these turbulent times would quickly show to act as the cornerstone of a revolution, creating the framework for the next stage of Rebecca's amazing adventure as the deluge of revelations and mounting pressure caused the many factions in Riverdale to approach a fever pitch. Medical Center and the surrounding area were about to undergo a permanent transformation when a variety of voices, from irate workers to fervent community activists, began to unite to create a force that threatened the hospital's established system. On a cold evening in a hospital private conference room, during a rushed internal debate, Dr. Rebecca Lawson gathered with several sympathetic colleagues to review the latest information. The air was tight and full with silent fear. During the meeting, a heated two groups got into a fight, with one side led by traditional supervisors who defended the hospital's stringent policies, while a group of younger doctors and nurses demanded broad overhaul. Top administrator Mr. Harrow slammed his fist into the table and shouted, "If we allow our emotions to interfere, decades of operational discipline cannot be jeopardized." There was a yell of dissatisfaction in response to his comments. Every act of compassion will cause chaos, and our patients will suffer. From people who have firsthand experience with the human cost of neglect, Lawson's, her own voice, albeit being measured, had an indisputable edge when she pointed out that our duty is not only to maintain peace, but also to. People do care if our system is so rigid that it punishes generosity. Then, we are failing our own goal outside the meeting room. The internal conflict had been rumored to have reached the hospital board, and local media had already taken notice of Olivia Reed's most recent expose. Negatively portrayed the board's suppression of innovative, compassionate treatment and financial mismanagement. Summoned an immediate meeting, split between the necessity of preserving the hospital's image and the indisputable Heated debates about whether to launch a comprehensive outside probe in reaction to the escalating scandals. The board's failure to agree on whether to carry out an audit or to handle the matter covertly within the company only deepened the rift between them. Amidst this chaos, the hospital's leadership and frontline staff receive a crucial call. Came from the area to attend a town hall meeting organized by Miss Charlotte Green, and the atmosphere was humming with enthusiasm as hundreds of residents, patients, and activists assembled in a large community hall, their faces exhibiting a range of emotions, including anger, hope, and Ms. Green said as she took the podium that a formal resolution. We would no longer accept the compromises made by our healthcare system, and an investigation into the hospital's operations was about to start. Compassion for profit, she continued, as the audience erupted in cheers, raising their voices. Despite a universal call for change, the internal strife at the hospital continued to play out, affecting. As the board deliberated their next move late that night, a covert break-in was found in the hospitals. In the low emergency lighting of the guarded archives, surveillance cameras silhouetted a hooded figure. Panic is sparked by the precise and calculated movement of illumination among the sealed records. Circulated among those who knew that the Project Compassion files housed in these archives included information that might disclose the facts of Dr. Lawson's dismissal in the hospitals. Martinez had been closely monitoring the situation as a financial irregularities officer. She ordered Raton Steely to hastily form a response squad. We need to secure those records immediately. In the hospital hallways, staff members congregated in small groups, their conversations tinged with fear and defiance. A young nurse, trembling but unflinching, informed a co-worker of the destruction of these information would mean the loss of our history and our hopes for a better future. The enormous personal stakes that each participant had simultaneously realized were involved in this argument were aptly conveyed by her quiet comments. Rebecca received an urgent text from an unknown number when her phone rang, instructing her to meet with a reliable person. She encountered an old mentor when she pulled into a nearby parking lot. "Quiet, Rebecca," Dr. Samuel Ortiz answered, his eyes a mix of sorrow and determination. Silently, "What's happening here is about more than one lost career. It's about a whole network of kind people. In order to stop more evidence from being permanently erased, caretakers must be silenced right now." His words resonated deeply with her, and she became even more determined to fight for the vindication of everyone, not just herself. A patient, nurse, and doctor who had been denied rights by a system that didn't give a damn. As the several conflict lines coalesced into a single, crucial event as dawn drew nearer, influencing the board, the media, and the internal. Both the dissidents and the community's call for transparency pushed for a conclusive. With the assistance of the urgent care center and her colleagues, Action Physician Lawson, she was ready to make the community's appeals, now that she had the proof of suppressed compassion, confront the hospital's administration, expose the truth, and reclaim the past of care that had been so ruthlessly disregarded at that pivotal moment when the hospital skyline was lit by the morning's first rays. Every heartbeat. People in the community and at Riverdale Medical Center are expecting a significant change. Internal conflicts had reached a pivotal moment, and the stage was now set for a climax that would redefine them. Not only the expertise of Dr. Lawson, but also the foundation of the pressure reached a crescendo when the forces at Riverdale Medical Center and the general public united on a single crucial moment in light of mounting proof of financial misconduct and suppressed empathy now burst into local headlines, indicating that the time for cunning maneuvering was over. There were impending conflicts that would force everyone to drive, including frontline staff, administrators, and community advocates will emerge late one rainy evening in a conference room deep within the hospital. An important discussion took place, and the physician, Rebecca Lawson, with a team of empathetic colleagues and officials from the newly formed internal. The reform group was seated across from a group of sullen hospital board members, and senior officials' irritation was palpable, and Miss Lise Carmichael was still in disbelief. She remarked, trying to rally the board's fragmented resolve in the wake of recent upheavals, "We stand at crossroads. Solid but tense, We can either continue down this path of melancholy and concealment or look forward to a time when, after a contentious debate, we make choices based on empathy and candor. Then, in an outraged tone, one board member slammed his fist against the board. The entire stability of our institution is in jeopardy if we allow your so-called reformers to act in an unfettered manner of individual judgment. We risk ruining both operational efficacy and patient care. Must remain our top priority. His words reverberated across the room, sparking various audience members' dissident mutterings. Dr. Eisen rose his eyes out. We and our patients are more than simply statistics if we are persistent and light. She diligently compiled the evidence, which demonstrates obvious acts of generosity, even if saving the stray puppy and so saving lives. I wasn't neglecting my obligations. I was demonstrating the therapeutic approach that this facility had previously advocated. If we continue to penalize, it is discussed that empathy not only betrays our own values, but also puts us at risk of losing the trust of the community. Shifted the meeting's focus and introduced a mid-level manager named Mr. Harov. Recognized for his steadfast defense of traditional values, he subtly admitted, I have seen firsthand how our processes may stifle empathy and creativity. Despite his tactful admission, he expressed concern that if we ignore this issue, our institution's heart will be forever damaged. Stated that a growing group on the board was ready to challenge the existing state of affairs both within and beyond the emotional upheaval in the conference room was mirrored in the dramatic town hall gathering that Community Advocate hosted. In front of a packed auditorium of patients, community organizers, and worried citizens, Miss A.G., Miss R. Charlotte Green. As he ascended the platform, Green said, Today we demand that we no longer tolerate a system that punishes kindness. Responsibility from everyone concerned, not simply those who fired Dr. Lawson for his moral behavior. An organization that has allowed compassion to be compromised for profit responded to her impassioned statement with a roar of support from the crowd, whose fervor highlighted the public's persistent desire for hospital change. Officer Martinez's inquiry into the break-ins yielded important evidence that linked top authorities. The board was forced to stifle Project Compassion because of the damning documents currently on the table. Confront a challenging truth. Their actions had not only silenced progressive care, but had directly established a dishonest culture that endangered patients and poor staff due to the mounting pressure of. Because of internal conflict and external scrutiny, the board began to split up some of its members. Advocated for an immediate, transparent review of hospital practices, but others, many people who were devoted to their previous allegiances at the time, rejected any drastic measures. Dr. Lawson's phone rang urgently during an internal dispute, and it was from her close ally, Dr. Samuel Ortiz, pleaded with her to go to his final meeting with. A few disobedient administrators got ready to part ways in a quiet, private conference room apart from. Dr. Ortiz and his colleagues made their audacious proposal in front of the audience, eliminating the existing hierarchical structure and putting in place a new care model that prioritized empathy, transparency, and community engagement. We must act now. Dr. Ortiz said in his voice that if we don't use this opportunity, we will continue to operate under a regime that puts efficiency ahead of people as. The board's decision became more heated as the evening went on, leading to a passionate vote. The majority of members who supported reform pushed for an external audit, which was conducted in secret. Despite reluctance, all pertinent data was made publicly available as part of the Project Compassion final vote. Heated debate signaled a radical shift, a clear and symbolic break from A. After passing Meade, Dr. Lawson sneaks out of the boardroom, missing Carmichael. A few employees and patients were in the hospital's main lobby when the newly empowered reformers arrived. Following their gathering, eagerly anticipating news, Miss Carmichael, with controlled assurance, addressed the crowd, admitting our mistakes from the past, and acting quickly after hearing your thoughts, committing to carrying out a comprehensive external audit of our processes and implementing changes that would restore transparency, and trust that compassion will not be a burden, but rather our guide. The statement sent shivers of relief and cautious hope through the hospital at that crucial moment. Moment when the decisions and arguments from that night came together to create a collective commitment to reestablish a promise. Because even the most stringent rules could be altered with empathy, Dr. As he looked out at the faces of those who had stood by her during her suffering, Lawson felt a new sense of purpose. The idea of a new chapter in which the rejection and struggles she had endured were replaced. A history of concern would no longer be buried by bureaucratic indifference. The stray puppy, which had come to symbolize her unwavering devotion, was nestled close by, giving her hope that this was merely the beginning of an adventure that will change not only her life but also Riverdale as a whole. Medical Center as twilight gave way to a chilly, starless night. At its height, the level of tension around Riverdale Medical Center was nearly unbearable. Every whispered conversation, every secret glance in shadowy corridors, and every worried heartbeat in the community hinted that the final act of this unfolding play was imminent. The evidence of corruption, suppressed compassion, and institutional unfairness was now visible to everybody. That the hospital will never be the same again. The mood was intense in a private conference room. Dr. Rebecca. Its windows are obscured from the outside world by heavy curtains. Lawson assembled with her team of reform-minded colleagues around stacks of documents and electronic data from, along with the mysterious flash drive, recent recordings of odd late-night activities near the archives. Before Rebecca's crucial moment, every piece of evidence was undeniable and reverberated like a ticking clock. As she read a damning memo from years ago, her hands trembled slightly. Edict declaring that any deviation from the strict procedure, including extra cautionary measures like hers, shall be dealt with significant consequences. That memo, which was previously hidden in the hospital's bureaucratic labyrinth, symbolized all that had gone wrong with the company, and every statement made her determination stronger. Across the corridor, the stifling silence officer's scars from her unjust dismissal were suddenly broken by a series of loud knocks. Martinez and her investigation team barged into the room with frantic expressions. "We've secured more." The security camera footage showed a hooded woman making the remark in a strong, yet incredulous voice. An individual known as the Mysterious Insider is attempting to sabotage Project Compassion once more. Files. The group was shocked by the disclosure, which made it clear that not only was there a conscious effort to hide the truth, but powerful forces were still working hard to stop any farther descent outdoors in the patients, employees, and local activists had assembled in the hospital's dimly lit atrium for their collective. The board held its breath, waiting for its next decision, and the whispering became louder with each passing minute. The sound of the crowd's shouts, Rose's quiet, and the combination of resolve, terror, and hope in the cold night air. We all want accountability and transparency in the boardroom. Encouraged by mounting evidence, the reform faction participated in the final vote. Although the community and frontline personnel passionate demands have pushed for significant reform, a complete disclosure of all project-related documentation, and an outside evaluation of the hospital's practices, the opposing faction's passionate devotion to tradition and profit-driven criteria was a sign of compassion. The atmosphere was tense because everyone knew that change was impending and that every vote had an impact on the. As the clock struck midnight, the board's decision about the institution's survival was finally announced in a voice that Miss Lise Carmichael stood on stage to address the group with a sense of resignation and a fresh determination. After a lengthy session, workers and media representatives are waiting outside that agreed to conduct a thorough external audit of all hospital operations, which would involve a close look at the. We will also be making all relevant Project Compassion files publicly available to ensure completeness, she said. Transparency and accountability as we start the process of restoring the. The declaration was met with a whirlwind of applause, tears, and cheers from those whose confidence had been violated. The crowd's reaction confirmed that compassion was the foundation of true love and not a sign of weakness. The oppressive weight of secrecy began to lift in that moment, and it was replaced by, in the quiet of the now vacant conference room, by the hopeful prospect of a new beginning. Rebecca remained alone for a while, gazing at the small photo of the stray puppy she was carrying inside of her. The journey had been tumultuous, including both personal and systemic catastrophe, betrayal. But as the first rays of a new day came through the window, she felt She muttered, "This is our moment," her voice trembling with a mixture of resolution and relief. "Tonight, we stood for every life that has been overlooked, and tomorrow we build a world where, in that pivotal time for each Riverdale soul, generosity is rewarded rather than penalized." All of the medical center's patients, staff, and community members who seemed to hold their breath as the scene was set for a momentous change and a confrontation with the history and a bold step into a future marked by kindness, integrity, and unwavering truth as the hospitals. As the corridors were filled with the promise of a better future, internal and foreign conflicts coalesced into there was now just one undeniable reality, and with it came the hope that nothing could be done, would never again be stifled by indifference or bureaucracy. As the night grew deeper, every elements of Riverdale Medical Center and the community seemed to unite in a single, exhilarating moment for Dr. Rebecca Lewin is in charge of the last conflict following months of suffering, betrayal, and, with unwavering determination, the long-suppressed files were now accessible. Incriminating evidence of financial misconduct and the resounding voices of compassionate caregivers had all led to. This last meeting marked a sea change that would affect not only her career, but the whole. Excitation and strong emotions pervaded the air as we sat in the hospital theater, collected the faces of professionals, former patients, and community members, illuminated by the soft glow of emergency lights and the blaze of anticipation in their eyes on stage. With a team of administrators dedicated to reform and Ms. Charlotte Green Officer Martinez by her side, Rebecca was prepared to reveal the truth that had been kept hidden for too long. Rebecca inhaled deeply before she spoke. Acts of kindness have been punished by the crowd for far too long, and our steadfast dedication to healing has been. Tonight, I stand before you bound by rigid protocols and profit-driven rules not. Although she was a disgraced doctor, her voice served as a spokeswoman for all caregivers whose compassion was viewed as a liability. Even though she remained solid, the weight of her journey made her tremble. This is our opportunity to reclaim what was rightfully taken from us, to prioritize humanity over statistics as a sign of consensus, and to be concerned with innovation. Echoed throughout the crowd, and the tension rose when Olivia Reed, standing at the platform with a digital camera and a stack of newly gathered documents, was the bold investigative reporter. As the slideshow played behind her, she began to describe the controversy in vivid detail. These papers, according to Olivia, show a deliberate suppression of Riverdale's altruistic actions. Medical Center discloses financial difficulties as well as a determined effort to silence individuals who dared to prioritize the needs of people over the required ledger entries and notes. There was intense silence and gasps from the crowd as a result of this internal communication. At that very moment, Officer Martinez stepped forward with crucial information that will aid in our investigation into the unquestionable evidence that senior authorities purposefully tried to remove has been made public by archival breaches. She mentioned the conflict in the documentation that would have validated her acts of kindness. Increased in the room as everyone realized that, in a final act of Parliament, the corruption was more widespread than anyone had first believed. The man in the cloak disobeyed the doctor after revealing an anonymous threat. Samuel Ortiz, a former mentor and quiet supporter of the pilot program's compassion, emerged from the shadows. His face, scarred by years of regret and resolve, told the story of a man who quit his work to protect. He said, "I have witnessed the harm done by burying truth under bureaucracy, the very ideals that had once inspired him. I am here now, speaking with emotion, to testify that suppressing empathy is not only unjust, but also When our mission as healers was betrayed, the confrontation reached its climax. Following widespread public outrage and mounting evidence, the hospital board ultimately acknowledged its misconduct. Louise Carmichael, who had previously been the strict enforcer of outdated standards, came forward. With a voice that wavered between resolve and desperation, and a sorrowful heart. In front of the community and staff in the room we allowed, she said, "We have failed you. Fear of change in order to conquer the true significance of our mission. At this time, we will begin a thorough external audit and provide the public with access to any records related to the suppression of compassionate care. We'll also establish a new oversight committee with the mission of ensuring that transparency and compassion become our organization's pillar." The announcement was met with an amazing surge of relief, and as joyous acclaim reverberated around the hall like a proclamation of optimism, tears fell down faces. Audience members' tears of approval, sorrow over past wrongs, and hope for a. It was a cathartic moment for Rebecca, but it also gave her hope for a better future. Bittersweet, she clutched the small photograph of hope as she gazed out at the sea of determined faces. "This is not only my victory, but also that of the stray puppy whose silent presence has come to symbolize the power of kindness," stated. "It is the victory of everyone who has ever been punished for caring too," in a clear and resonant voice. "It is the guarantee that no selfless act will ever again be cloaked in secrecy at that crucial juncture. The weight of censorship and bureaucracy was lifted by the collective bravery of a united people. Empathy revealed the hospital's tumultuous history, and a surge of Alter promised that the tradition of goodwill would now be recorded in powerful, unquestionable letters as the assembly. Everyone in the room felt the spark of a new day as the day drew to a close, and the first rays of sunrise emerged through the shadows. Revolution in which honesty, empathy, and the will to prioritize the needs of others over one's own will fundamentally change the healthcare environment. And when Rebecca left the stage, her eyes met those of her colleagues, patients, and supporters, each of whom exemplifies the perseverance and lasting power of compassion in the type. The echoes of that night of change were still reverberating through Riverdale's hallways in the light of a new day. Medical center, and in the hearts of the community, it offered devastating assistance during the Revelation storm. Conflicts and brave resistance have finally given way to a cautious hope and renewed. This began as a simple act of kindness for Dr. Rebecca Lawson. Saving a stray puppy on a cold autumn morning had become a catalyst for change that impacted every part of the. There were already discernible signs of improvement as the institution slowly emerged from its dark phase. It is evident that the ongoing external audit ensured transparency and accountability, and the recently formed Oversight Committee was tasked with ensuring that the caring would never again be suppressed. Louise Carmichael and her colleagues believed, once thought to be harsh enforcers of a severe system, had expressed sincere remorse and promised to repair. Believe that their candid admission of their past mistakes marked the beginning of a healing process that will eventually. Rebecca put a lot of personal work into restoring the hospital's reputation. Once, the pain of being fired for a charitable act had threatened to break her spirit, but after the astonishing disclosures and the overwhelming public support, she was rejuvenated by a sense of. She felt a sense of purpose every time she looked at Hope, the stray puppy who had come to silently represent her. Rebecca came to terms with the possibility that every day, even the smallest act of kindness could result in significant change. Instead of being a dismissed doctor, her new role as a pioneer for compassionate care, she began collaborating on projects with old coworkers, local politicians, and animal shelters that recognized and rewarded medical care and compassion at community events, in surrounding facilities, and even within the. Both workers and residents used the hospital's recently refurbished patient lounges, came together to share their stories of loss, healing, and hope for the elderly. Disillusioned with a system that had made them feel invisible, they took solace in the knowledge that their voices mattered. Mrs. Thompson, a lifelong patient, remarked, "I have witnessed the shift in interpersonal relationships, with gratitude shining in her eyes. Today, I feel like a person with a backstory rather than simply a number." Previously a continual source of criticism, the media has suddenly joined Olivia Reed's. The groundbreaking series on the Lost Healers not only exposed the evil underbelly of Riverdale Medical Center, but has caused other organizations to reevaluate their practices, according to her paper, containing in-depth interviews and compelling information that spark conversations about the true cost of prioritizing profits over people, while local media sources praised the hospital's bold move. Reform movement, the public's confidence began to be rebuilt piece by piece through. In Riverdale Medical Center's hallways, candid dialogue and reciprocal commitment. Previously divided by bureaucracy and fear, mid-level managers and frontline staff were quietly going through a revolution. Unofficial compassion circles were established in conjunction with renewed energy. Small groups of doctors, nurses, and administrators that met regularly to talk about their challenges and achievements. These organizations fostered friendships and serve as incubators for innovative ideas. Ideas for integrating compassion into standard medical treatment for a number of fire. The transformation was quite remarkable and showed the enduring importance of human connections on A. Early in the morning, as sunlight poured through spotless windows, Dr. Lawson delivered a heartfelt speech to her colleagues. She declared that today marks the beginning of a new chapter, where we are open and honest, where we value every act of compassion, and where our intention is to heal rather than just. We serve each person's body, but also their heart and soul, she stated. Struck a deep chord, igniting a collective determination to change the future of healthcare. Before closing, urge you, if Rebecca's journey has inspired you to join this movement of accountability and empathy. For more, follow us on YouTube if you believe that every act of kindness has the capacity to affect change. Stories that celebrate resilience, bravery, and the transformative power of compassion. Watch this video with your friends and family, and leave a comment with your tales of kindness, transforming lives so that we can together build a. We appreciate your participation in our community and hope that one day there will never be a good deed hidden in the shadows. For the upcoming chapter of our story, which will be filled with love, hope, and the undeniable, the human spirit's fortitude,